Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well. This is our last webinar for the season of the summer 2025. We've all just come back, or two of us here on the panel have just come back from Art Basel. We have Leticia from Espace L in Geneva who's joining us today, and John Robinette from New York. He's got in the background, you can see the Semillas, which is an art piece, a monumental art installation by Jaime Miranda Bambaren. And I just learned today that he's also opened a new or installed a new place near the Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. So we're very happy to welcome you both. Let me give you a little bit of maintenance. Well, number one, you can ask questions by writing them down in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll be looking. So please feel free to put your questions down to our panelists. And also this panel is being recorded and will be streamed on YouTube later on. I think it's also live on the WISe.ART channel. So anybody who has questions, please do interrupt us. And also the panelists, I've told them this was informal and they can go ahead and extrapolate and tell us what they do. So again, thank you very much for being here with us. Leticia, you've just come back from Basel. You were exhibiting at Basel Photo, and I know you had a very cool project, which was vintage actually. So you have a contemporary art gallery, but you had a vintage project. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Hi, everyone. Yes, it was really the idea of making a statement during Photo Basel 2025, presenting the work of Betty Lerner, she's a Brazilian artist living in Basel, and she had a solo show at the São Paulo Art Museum in '78. And so we have presented in Photo Basel an L with the book, the artist book from '78 that presented the pieces that she had at the MASP, the São Paulo Art Museum. At the time, she was 18 only, and she has always kept aside. I thought it was important to present a historical piece.
And there's only very few of those books left, right? There's only 6 or something.
She had found 10 that she signed Virgin 1 to 10 because they were untouched since '78.
That's incredible.
Yes. And we also presented the Nijinsky series where she honored the dancer by photographing her male model. And it's really a photogram on cardboard, and it's beautiful. The entire idea of the space, having a small piece. So sometimes it's good. I find interesting to be contre-courant. So that's why. And that was also a balance regarding the gallery program, fair program this year. Since in Art Genève, I have presented a very daring project with a bridge between virtual and physical world.
Yeah, that was also super interesting where you had augmented reality and real spaces with the sculptures put through the phone or through a screen. So thank you. We'll ask you a little bit more about the market later on, but I just want to introduce John Robinette, who's joined us from New York. We've actually never met physically, but we've spoken quite a bit. And so you're an art collection manager. What does that mean? What do you do?
So we manage all of the behind the scenes, the practical aspects of what it means to actually hold art and artifact collections, right? So, that includes everything from managing the invoice at the time of acquisition, managing a database, all the data that one would accumulate over the life of an artwork, everything from provenance to, publication history, exhibition history, and the technical data, photographs, etc., condition, insurance, contracts, loan contracts, things like this. So all of that type of work that goes along, storage, another major aspect. So the essentially a hub for all of the other services that one might contract that are related to having and holding an art collection. And of course, all of these things
Of
ultimately
course,
really.
that makes a lot of sense because when you are a collector and you want to sell a piece, if you've got everything in the same place and in order, it makes a sale much easier and it also puts the buyer in a very comfortable position. So it actually gives value to a collection to have that service. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And even something as basic as knowing where the piece is. It might sound simple, like a painting. Okay, there's only one object, but more contemporary works have whether multiple pieces, an installation, a video that might have multiple components. Um, all of these things, one piece might be in conservation, one piece might be in storage, and one piece might be in the house, for example. So all of these aspects are very important, and they can get exponentially more complicated as we go along. So, and then the other aspect of what I oversee is the installation, proper installation and packing of these things, because of course, damage is a major contributor to devaluing works of art. So
Of course. And are your clients mainly institutions, or you also work with private foundations or collectors,
all of the
individual
above.
collectors?
Yeah.
All of the above. And
So
do you also, like having come from the art world as well, and I worked for a gallery for a while that had major masterpieces, it was also very important to lend those pieces to various, especially international traveling exhibitions, so that they are in the catalog, etc., also
mhm,
giving value to the piece. Would you say
exactly.
that you follow that as well? Like you would know if the Tate was looking for a Douanier Rousseau, for example, or is that not
Yeah.
part of your work?
No, no. I mean, I don't personally source those types of exhibitions, but it's ultimately, if it's a major work, institutions know about it by and large, right? If you have an advisor or some sort of consultant that's working with you, like on a private collector side, they might help contribute to those things. But me personally, that's not the type of work that we do. That tends to fit in
Okay.
more curatorial, job description.
Okay, that's right.
But
So,
we would document it and manage those contracts and make sure that it's maintained in the history of the piece.
well, sometimes it's also a little bit of luck because just recently, in the gallery where I used to work, we also bought, well, we were able to buy pieces for an interesting price, and so I have two by an artist called Marc-Antoine Fer, and he lives in France right now, and they're doing a catalogue raisonné on him. And
Mm.
I met by pure coincidence, I met the person in charge of the catalogue raisonné. So very proudly, I said, "Oh, I have two." And he said, "Oh, really?" And he had no idea. So sometimes
Oh,
it
wow.
just happens. So my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pieces are going to be in the next catalogue raisonné, which is quite nice.
Oh,
And
that'll
as I
be pretty
said, it's
doc-
important for artworks to live and to be seen and to be lent in exhibitions and that sort of thing. It's always a plus.
right.
Leticia, you've just come back from Art Basel. I know you were in Basel Photo, but I mean, there's so much going on in the Basel Art Week. Were you able to see other shows? Were you able to walk around and get a feel for the market or not?
Well, I did walk around. I went to collectors' breakfast, etc., and of course, mainly the Brazilian galleries in
Okay.
Basel.
There were quite a few upstairs of
Six total.
six from Brazil, but then there was some Mexican ones. So LATAM was actually quite well represented, would you say, more than the other years?
I I don't know the statistics for sure, but yes, there is a lot of presence from Latin America.
Yeah. It's do you think the collectors in Brazil are buying in Brazil or are they like the Swiss that they buy outside of Switzerland?
Depends on the collector. On the
Okay, okay, it's a good answer.
well, it's true.
Um, all right. Well, we also obviously with WISe.ART are very busy with the digital aspect of things. So Leticia is a little bit onboarded with her virtual reality and artists like Nako Kako and a few others that are working in that environment. What would you say, John? Is it picking up a little bit in America, or are we still very traditional in New York?
I think that there is the everyone's saying, there's a lot of uncertainty. We're not expecting much. We don't really know what's happening, but it's the from my experience, it seems like there's still plenty happening. So I don't know statistically if that's borne out, but what people are saying and expecting doesn't seem to be exactly what's actually happening. For example, I'm still very busy. I'm still doing a lot of projects and things like that. I think ultimately it comes down to how comfortable wealthy people feel with investing and doing things because I'm doing a lot of work through other companies, but for private collectors. And so I sense that is kind of what's
It's a
happening, right? So,
topic of discussion. Would you say, because I've always thought that the blockchain would be um, a plus also for institutions who've got traditional work as a like a new type of catalog raisonné for their inventories and just to have all the provenance and all the certificates, even though some of them are still dubious and need to be proved right, but at least those that are established we can put on the blockchain and it's immutable and it's the beginning of a new type of storage. Do you see it that way as well? Because that's what we're trying to do with WISE.ART as well, is to have those chips on a paint, or like to be able to identify a painting with its NFT and with the physical documentation that goes with it. Is that a topic? Like, do you find you've got demand for that from the insurance companies or the
no,
museums?
not yet.
No.
Not yet. I think big institutions like major museums are really going to be the last people to get on board with this idea because I mean right now unfortunately the trends at least in the US is that museums are undergoing major layoffs. There's really no budget for these types of things, so they're really cutting back on a lot of things. They're extending the length of exhibitions,
Mm-hmm.
so not only for budget reasons but also just not for day-to-day budget reasons but for like future budget reasons. um because of just the immense cost and time required to adopt a new technology. So
Mm-hmm.
if you imagine a major encyclopedic museum, a Metropolitan Museum of Art, a Louvre, these types of places that have hundreds of thousands, if not, millions of objects, the idea of that work and that investment, and of course, maybe they just prioritize the top 1,000 pieces or something, but it's still an immense amount of work and an immense upfront cost to do that type of thing. I think the early adopters should be, and I think there are people looking into this, the galleries, right? People that are working directly with the living artists. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, these pieces here, these some of these are 2 meters in diameter, right? So they're very large and very difficult to create false
And to move, no, they're super
and
heavy.
to move, yeah. But with smaller versions of these that are easy to falsify, we
Mm-hmm.
have created a digital certificate of authenticity that's secured on a blockchain that whenever they're sold, we pass on that certificate. So it makes sense straight out of the artist's studio to secure that provenance and that history on a
Mm-hmm.
digital blockchain certificate so that it can be easily passed on. And, then it can be, images can be reproduced infinitely. And, we still know who the primary
Who
owner.
was the original, the originator, I would say. Yeah, we actually
Exactly.
started doing that together, didn't we, with
Yeah,
on
exactly. So,
WiseArt. Um, the idea as well about the NFT and the certification, I think would need to be a must or a real need. Whereas now I was surprised, for example, that the Louvre you mentioned earlier, with their 3 million artifacts and whatever that nobody's ever seen because it's all in storage. Well, they had to move it because they're expecting the Seine to rise. And so they moved it some 300 kilometers away from Paris. And I was surprised to find out then that that's the first time that they were actually digitalizing. That means just photographing those pieces for the very first time. So apparently they started during COVID because the museums were closed and all of a sudden they had time on their hands and needed to keep the people employed.
mhm.
But yeah, it's amazing to think that most museums still have paper photographs and inventories of their collections. I know in Switzerland, the l'Élysée, which is the Museum of Photography, they've still got hundreds of negatives that are on glass plates that are still in their boxes that are very difficult to maneuver because if you put them to the light, they fade off. So
Yeah.
just to photograph them is a complicated matter. I'm also proud to say that the museum in Geneva, the Art and History Museum, has just finished last year to photograph all their pieces, and they're digitalizing now. And one of the interesting things is that their project is to actually create a game, so to make it more an attraction for the younger visitors, and to keep their audience captive. So that's another use for NFTs and what they call POAPs, those proof of presence and
Mm.
that sort of thing. So I guess before we go into the more must-have for insurance and also provenance, it's going to go to the gaming before it gets adopted for the rest. Probably it's going to
Right.
be that way. Leticia, when you did your augmented reality in Geneva, did you find that the younger audiences were more interested or not really?
Good question. Yes, they were very interested, eventually more open to it.
Okay, yeah.
So that everybody was a bit curious, especially with the headset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that there was some?
Yeah, virtual world, not only augmented reality. All of the artists had their universe online, and people would access and get into each artist's universe, and we would have a physical piece on the booth.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
It was
And did you see a lot of it in Basel? Because me walking around, I have to say I didn't see very much digital art.
no, I saw one big installation at the Unlimited at the entrance of screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Some
Mm.
videos. That's all.
Yeah, same. I didn't there was two galleries in the art fair in the Art Basel that were videos, as you say, but not so much. Yeah, the NFT matter is a little bit on the side, but I also think it's interesting to have a whole group of artists that are now using the computer as a tool, as a painting tool, or as a creation tool. And you don't need to do an NFT. You can just use the computer and do your art and be creative without being on the blockchain. And I
Mhm.
think it's going to go that way before the blockchain is fully adopted.
Mm, yeah.
In
Hot
in
one
your
already.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if in your experience 16 like um and maybe you too, Leticia, I don't know if you're working with artists as well with this, but like is there some sort of hesitation with artists um to utilize, say, this sort of digital certificate of authenticity that's blockchain backed? Is there a hesitation, a skepticism about using that technology?
I think it's just a parallel world in a way. There is its own crowd, a different language. It's very specific. It's different than the regular common. And also in Basel this year, they had a parallel fair for no 16.
Yeah, called the Digital Art Mile. It was in the same street as Basel Photo, which is
Yeah,
the Rebgasse, where there's a lot of things happening actually
yeah,
right now. It's sort of the second, you've got Messeplatz and you've got Rebgasse. And it's a guy called Georg Bach who's doing that. He did it for the second year running, and he's based in Zug. But he's also an art historian, so it's always very interesting to speak with him because he's got the digital art, but and he's very knowledgeable and expert with it. But he's also been a just a normal contemporary art dealer in his career.
it was
Yeah.
sorry, it was the first edition of the fair or
No, second.
second,
He started last year.
and it
And
went
it was
well, right?
interesting because
Yeah,
last year it was a big introduction to all the major players, mainly from America. There was people like Maker's Place, and of course there's Tezos. Tezos is one of the blockchains that the art world uses a lot. Also, Art Basel had adopted and started working with Tezos. They're also based in Zug. So he's got them. But what was interesting this year is, as an art historian, he brought back a lot of things that were from the past, out of which was a whole project with Paintbox. Paintbox was a software that was invented in the mid 80s by English people, actually, and that got later on bought out by Apple. But Paintbox was the first time ever in the mid 80s where an artist didn't have to sketch and didn't have to, he could photograph, he could do spray paint, he could do paint, whatever, all on the computer, and he could actually do cut and paste, etc., all on the computer. And the software at the time was like $500,000. It was a huge thing to have. So not every artist had it. And of course, a few years later, like 6, 7 years later, Photoshop came out and everybody had access to Photoshop. But what was really interesting to see is that there were young artists who work today who went onto this Paintbox machine and said, "Oh my God, it's so slow and the resolution is so bad." And, but nobody sort of understands that in the 80s it was revolutionary and, huge time saver for artists. And they all played around with it. David Hockney, Andy Warhol, Keith Haring, they were all on this. And so this exhibition that they had this year at the Digital Art Mile was about these old pieces, about Keith Haring, about David Hockney. And that was really cool to see.
Mm. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always just wonder, like, especially, more traditional media artists, like a painter, a sculptor, how open to these ideas they are. And obviously it's case by case, but yeah, anyway, I think that they're going to play a big role in the adoption of the.
Absolutely. I think artists and the creativity that they have and their mindset is different to the average person. Otherwise, we'd all be artists. And contrarily to what some people say, we're not all artists. But I think that's what pushes also the scientific development ahead, is when all of a sudden somebody creative with another vision takes on their tool and makes it something different.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's interesting. And CERN here in Geneva, the Nuclear Research Center, they work with artists all the time because of that different angle and that different vision. And there's an artist today called Tyler Hobbs. He's quite famous in the digital environment, and he generated with AI, prompting it chaos and order, 40,000 images, of which he picked 25 and actually printed them on wood, wood panels that were 1 meter by 1 meter, and they sold out. So at the end of the day, I think to answer your question from the beginning, John, I think the reason why the adoption is a bit slower is because it's still complicated. But there, when you explain to the people that these wood panels were actually created by AI, prompted, of course, by an artist, but and then printed by a machine with a machine, and these pieces were physical, but they were completely computer generated. They sold out. So there is interest and curiosity, and I don't think it's a judgment on, the AI is going to replace the artist. It's not about that.
Yeah.
Now, maybe on the commercial side a little bit, Leticia, do you think everybody's saying the art market is stagnating, the big auction houses are not doing the record sales that they did 3, 4 years ago. Did you find a difference during the fair? And we're just about to go to Art Monaco too, so it's going to be an interesting comparison next week. But do you find, I read the report from Basel and they were actually quite pleased, and there were still, there was a lot of transactions took place. Did you find it slowing down or not?
Well, since I had such a historical booth,
Yeah,
it was
difficult to say.
yeah, and even then we succeeded. So, but I think things happen all the time, and eventually more cautiously. I sold to very good collectors. So I have some very good emails back from unexpected people that passed it by, and I was like, whoa. So I think.
And are you getting new people? Have you met, do you meet every fair? Do you meet new
Yeah,
collectors, or is it
yeah.
your old friends?
No, new people.
You meet new ones.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering also if this
I
the
mean, both.
digital art mile and that new generation who's curious and the sort of real passionate art collector who wants to have every piece, like as it come, every new development, whether that new medium can also entice new people to come into the art fairs and buy traditionally. That's what they were saying at Sotheby's and Christie's when they did the Beeple sale and then the Idan sale, which was a robot painting, that they said it actually brings them new clients that probably would not have gone to an auction house before that.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
I believe that.
Yeah. And what about you, John? Do you find that your line of work is actually bringing in new collectors and that they want your services, or is it more the traditional collectors that say, no, we need that?
Look, it's kind of mixed. Either way, it's still an uphill battle to convince even, the most prominent collectors that they need, to manage their collection on a professional basis, right? There are plenty of collectors that operate, that have a family office, for example, who, kind of control the investment and the purse strings of the collector. And so we're always trying to pitch our role in the value, right? In terms of like, maintaining the physical condition, in the same way that, I think of it like real estate, right? So, you go to sell a house, right? Well, it's one thing to say that it's a famous architect that made it, but it's another thing to say that it's in good condition or bad condition, right? So, so we contribute to the rest, the maintenance of value, and as much as we can. Obviously, we don't control the market, but in as much as we can, we contribute a service that um, should go a long way to preserving the value of a piece.
And you get artists coming to you and saying, like, I hope to be, still famous when I'm 100 or when my pieces are 100 years old. So, what should I do? Or
No, I
are they
think the
not
artists are
concerned?
no, and most of the time I think they're going to a gallery
Yeah.
for that sort of advice. And but yeah, I still think it's important. And maybe I don't work with say currently with any blue chip artists, for example, but maybe if you're in that role, they would take a more proactive step towards utilizing some of these things, right? If you
Mhm.
are, in that position, you maybe have a staff that can help enact these things. So I think that, um, I would think that on that level, you're doing that if you're, Jeff Koons, for example. So,
Yeah. You,
um,
you, with Jeff Koons, I mean, he's got so many workers working with him. Obviously, it's a whole industry, but I was going to ask Leticia if do you take responsibility of the pieces that you sell in respect to the artists that you represent? Like if somebody bought something from you and 10 years down the line it faded, or I don't know, something happened to the piece, or is that not part of the gallerist's job?
Uh-huh. Well, I guess it depends. I mean, once I had a piece made by kites, and the paper of the kites they fade with light.
Mm-hmm.
So I told an institution wanted to buy it. I said this is an ephemeral piece because it's going to change with the time and color. So it was clear. I think
Mm-hmm.
it had
From
to
the
be
beginning.
clear from the beginning, and then it's a choice. Also, I mean, in photography or prints, we need to have, of course, the UV
Yep.
glass.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we
So
have a
there
mid.
is that part where John would come in and say, you guys, you've got an old Italian Renaissance, drawing collection. You need to look after it in terms of light and, as you say, protection, museum glass, and that sort of thing.
Wise, yes.
Yeah.
well,
And
some of these things actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, but with some of this information that you're discussing could be conveyed in a digital, blockchain secured certificate of authenticity, right? So if you make these decisions beforehand at the time of the conception of the work, or even shortly after, um, you can put that information on these certificates of authenticity so that you know in 100 years you're like, okay, well, the artist always intended for the piece to decay and ultimately to have a finite lifespan,
Yeah.
or these are the criteria. I understand in 100 years technology and materials will be different, but this was the intent of the work, and so we're going to restore the work under these with this intent in mind, right? So
Mhm.
A little
that's
bit like a soluet, if you like, those
yes,
fabulous
exactly,
murals that he did. And you
exactly.
had it came with the instructions sort of thing so that you could reciprocate the piece if you moved house or if it was damaged. I
Hmm.
guess it's the same with the semillas behind you. I mean, they're obviously wood, so they're going to live their life and they're going to alter themselves, and especially if they're outside. So it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. We
And
had
it's, would you
these.
say it's part of the artwork? It's part
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the, yeah, for a collector, it's important that the piece lives on, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Look, and of course, being outside versus in inside is a major factor. But in speaking with Jaime about these, they were outside for a year in New York, and so this is shortly after they were installed. So they're very clean and they're very bright, but they took on the patina of their environment after a year. And I think that there is an element where some artists, I don't know this to be a fact, and I'm not making an accusation, but sometimes they take the position that, you know, this is the way the piece is. It's supposed to, decay and die. Of course, on our end, it's our role to preserve the piece as long as possible. Um, I think sometimes they make these decisions because not because it's actually the intent. It's just, that's where they are at the time, and they don't necessarily want to or believe that it should be repaired. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Like I said, it's I'm not trying to make an accusation. I just think that sometimes it genuinely is clear that this is the intent of the work to have a finite life, and sometimes it isn't. So
Yeah, it's very interesting to see also how artists will learn also with their materials. Vic Muniz, for example, he used to work with hair, and that just came undone after a few years. Like the most of the pieces were down in the bottom of the frame. We actually have a question. Thank you, Dina, for being with us today. Dina is based in Italy and in the UK, and she's got two questions. The first one is, how can artists learn more about how to work and use artificial intelligence positively? Well, again, as I'll let Leticia answer that in a minute because she's got artists working with AI. But if I can say there's a lot of tutorials, and I think it all depends on the artist's creativity and how you use the tool. It's like having an iPhone. You can take very good photographs and you can take very ordinary photographs. So, what would you say? You've been working with artists who use AI, Leticia.
Yes, especially Nakokako, and what I know is she spends a lot of time experimenting and using different kinds of AI. She's aware, she knows, and she tries
Yeah,
until
it's a
she
lot of trial
arrives
and
to what
error.
yeah,
Yeah.
she will until she arrives to what she wants.
That's right. And also, Dina, there's open source, of course, but you can also buy your own software. And as I said, there's many tutorials out there. So I think artists, they're just curious and they've been using, well, not AI so much because that hasn't been out that long, at least in open source, but the computer for a long time. The second question is there a possibility the auction houses would ever look at art that isn't on the secondary market? Yeah, that's an interesting question. And yes, they did, because I guess Adan again, who's a robot, obviously hasn't got a second market yet. And also Beeple. Well, Beeple was very famous before he started, but I mean, it was the first time that his work reached those amounts and broke those records. No, what do you think, Leticia?
Yes, people and also Banksy.
Banksy, of course, yeah. So he
Oh
did a
no.
performance actually because his piece auto-destroyed
Yeah.
once it was bought. But yeah, I guess Christie's and Sotheby's, not to do any advertising for them, but they are a little bit innovative in that respect, and they do work with artists directly. Well, Koons as well, no, I would say. And there was that famous story where Damien Hirst was reselling his own pieces.
Mm.
Would you
So,
say a lot of times it's that kind of primary market sale via an auction house is often facilitated by a gallery?
all right, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, is the gallery responsible for placing a piece in the auction house or at
Mhm.
auction?
Okay, that maybe they haven't sold, or to go directly saying we're going to try and boost the price so that we
I think
can then
probably the
sell.
latter.
Yeah,
Probably the latter.
okay.
So it probably give some credibility to the work if it appears on at a major auction house, for example.
Yeah,
Mhm.
isn't that funny? Because that's how the market has changed a little bit. Because when I was working, when I started to work, let's say, it was more about the gallery. Like if you bought something from Aquavella, or if you bought something from where I was at Crugier's, that gave it credibility. Whereas
Mhm.
over the years, it's now, well, if you bought it at Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonhams, or whatever it is, Phillips, then it's got to be good. So
Mhm.
that's changed a little bit. The gallery was more of the credibility factor and the advisor
Mhm.
in the, let's say, up until the years 2000, I would say. I think the internet changed that as well because people could access and see art more easily on the internet. And if you Google Picasso, it'll all come up, Christie's, Sotheby's, and whoever's selling.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, and also, obviously it expands the potential audience for the piece, right? Not everybody who steps into the gallery itself or in the booth at the art fair, um, not everybody has that luxury, right? So they can see it, online through a
Yeah.
catalog, you know,
As a
digital.
gallerist, Leticia, do you sell online or not so much?
Not so much.
Yeah. It's strange because when I, again, like my own experience was always, I didn't think anybody would ever buy a piece without seeing it.
Mhm.
And today people do buy pieces without seeing them.
Yeah.
I mean, we buy everything without seeing it, actually, from
Yeah.
clothes to food to art now too.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true.
Mm. Let me see. I think I have another question. Oh no, it's still Dina saying that we're doing a very interesting webinar. So thank you. Thanks to you,
Mm.
Dina. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. So where do you see the market going from here? Like John as well, where do you see your collections are growing, or where do you see it going?
Leticia, do you want to start on this?
Ha. Very good question. Since what I present is very upcoming, and the gallery has a program also for non-represented artists, so I, I I will keep up the same path for now. About the market, I have no idea. I feel there is a transition going on, and let's see how the new gen is going to behave, collectioning. Collection wise, I don't know how they. Let's see.
Are you working with the same artists over many years, or do you pick up new ones along the way? Every year you have a new artist that you want to work with?
I do have new ones, but it happens naturally. It's sometimes I discover, and I like to present the work, and it works well, and then we continue. So it's very organic, actually, the functioning of a gallery.
Hmm.
Um, but mainly, I like to have the same ones, or in, let's say, in base, or keep up the concept, the bridge.
And have you had the experience where an artist just said, "Look, Leticia, thank you. You helped me, and I'm now going on to the next level, and I'm going to leave you and go to Gagosian or another gallery that's maybe more international."
Well, not yet one of my artists, but there's one artist that I have presented, or even more than say, that I like to present again, and they say, now I want to think about it. I'm positioning myself in the market. I want to have voila, at one specific gallery. Okay.
Okay. So maybe Julien Spiewak, no, the
No,
Belgium photographer.
always together.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, John, with your line of work, do you think together now with the market growing in the future, do you think there'll be more demand for these forensic analysis and there's more to do with scientific studies of a painting? Or is that also a nice to have but not need to have situation?
I think it's going to become very important if it isn't already for um, historic pieces or especially old paintings, old masters. I mean, there's so few that are available that one has to be skeptical when something like that does come on the market, right? And so you see a lot. For some reason, Switzerland loves to develop, AI or some sort of art technology that's based on you know high resolution scanning and photography and these types of things. But I mean, there's like at least 4 or 5 companies that are based in Switzerland that do this type of work that are
Yeah.
authenticating works um, by historic pieces, right? So I think that that is going to be a major role in those things going forward, and it plays a large role in conservation as well. As we go forward, there's going to be a huge role for technology and
Yeah.
that's right. So imagine if you're trying to restore a Rubens painting, for example, right? Having that information, having these scans, and if you can compare that with known authentic pieces that gives you a lot of information to move forward with the best practice for how to restore a piece, right?
Hmm.
And of course, it also develops problems that you have to solve, right? Maybe there were previous restorations. Which ones do I remove? To what state
Mm.
to restore this?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a fine line.
so no, I think those types of technologies are going to be very, very important. And of course, anytime authentication comes up, it creates a controversy, but I think that you know these technologies are really obviously what they're trying they're not hard and fast. They're not they usually give a range like this is you know there's an 80% possibility that this is authentic, right? So
Yeah.
they're minimizing the risk of forgery, for example, right? So
It's also still in the, I think, in the eye of the expert with all the different analysis. I mean, we saw the case with the infamous Salvatore Mundi, whereas people are still debating whether the analysis was good or not, and whether the British who accepted it in their Leonardo da Vinci retrospective were right, or whether the French were wrong by not taking it. I mean, there's a whole big controversy there. And I think there's also a lot of politics involved. From what I heard, is that the Salvatore Mundi, the owner, the current owner, wanted to have it next to the Mona Lisa, and the Louvre just said no, it has nothing to do next to the Mona Lisa, and that's why there was this misunderstanding. And then people love to say, well, it's because it was a fake, but I think there's more to it than that. And
right.
but still between the different experts, they're not agreeing on something. So I don't think science is the end all be all of it all. I think it's still the human eye.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that ultimately we're gonna blend the two, and we're gonna use both in the determination of these
Yeah.
decisions to make these decisions. So I think that is ultimately we're just adding tools to the capability as opposed to just relying on this doesn't feel like
Yeah.
Da Vinci, right? That certainly I think that great works do give off an aura like that, but um, you know, we don't always know, you know, if the person feeling that aura is feeling the same aura that the other one gave off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
there's
yeah,
I
compounds.
remember the story where what's the guy that was the expert for Max Ernst, and Paul Klee. He was also at one stage going through a divorce and needed to make some money, and so came up with some authenticity certificates, which were actually very quickly done and not so much like he felt the aura at the time because he needed to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
But
No, but
AI is going to be, as we move on with this, and that there's more and more of these scientific, indisputable studies like carbon dating and stuff like that, where you can't go against that. And as there is more and more of that recorded, AI will probably be a quick way of being able to compare these things. Whereas now, I think, again, a little bit with the NFTs, it's the same thing. To answer your question before, John, it's that it's still just too complicated. And I think with the AI being taught and machine learning going faster and faster, this will change because it won't be as complicated anymore.
yeah, I think this word blockchain will somewhat disappear if it already hasn't.
Yeah,
But the technology, NFTs, people don't really mention NFTs anymore, but the technology remains.
yeah,
All of this stuff will continue to operate. We just won't feel it. We won't have to say it, We're just
that's
going to
right.
say, oh, I'm going to enter, work with my database and I'm going to use this tool here, and it's going to incorporate machine learning, AI, blockchain, NFTs, but you won't have to say those words in order to reap the benefits. That's,
Yeah.
that's the way I see this going, if it hasn't already. So,
I think that took place a little bit in the finance world where now everybody, well, we started paying with credit cards a while back, and now we're all paying with our phones, and
mhm,
nobody really doubts it.
right,
And there
right.
are scams. I mean, it's just as somehow the scams in the art world and the ripping off of intellectual property and all that seems to be a big issue in the art world. But then there's just as many scams, if not more, in the rest of the industries like pharmaceuticals as well. So it's something that I think the media as well, the social media or media has taken a hold of, and it's unfortunate in a way because, as you say, the technology is not going to go away now.
hmm No, but it's also exciting because I think we're going to use technology to fight we're going to use positive technology to fight the negative technologies, right?
Hmm.
And I think that um, it's just going to be part of our daily life as we continue to
Yeah,
move. And there's
I
going to be a
think
lot of
that's
resistance
it's
to
a
that
good
too.
resolve to put it that way. Do you
Yeah.
find, Leticia, that well, you have a daughter who's in communication and everything, and I know she, because I work with her, but she uses a lot of it all the time. Are you like, do you find it helpful in your day-to-day work, like with your writing of catalogs and things like that, or not so much?
What do you mean, the AI?
Yeah.
Yes, helpful.
Helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as John says, I think we're all going to organically just keep using it because
It's a
it is
tool. I mean,
helpful.
you might as well learn how to use it well, properly.
Yeah. Well, as our CEO says, Carlos, he always says, those who don't know how to use AI will be replaced by AI, but those who know how to use it will get better jobs in the future.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I'm very motivated to participate in this simply because so much of new technology is dictated by people that don't interact or don't have direct experience with our industry.
Hmm.
And for us to take control of that and to become essentially insiders, we can kind of control more of the usage, but more importantly, what tools are actually available, right? And in other words, um, people from the outside might think they're solving a problem for us, but on the inside, we might say, "Hey, look, that's not a problem. This is the problem, and this is the one that I want to solve." And I think
Yeah.
that AI or whatever the tool can be, um, can be the means to solve that problem, right? So that's my point of view, and that's how I want to interact with these things in a
Yeah.
positive way.
And I
It's
think you're right with this machine learning is that a lot of people in the general public don't know about the arts industry. And, just like people in the arts industry may not know about medical or political or whatever it is. But I think what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people who were bankers or lawyers or whatever say, oh, we're going to start being art brokers because it's a buoyant business and because it's lucrative, etc. But as you say, they don't know the quirks of the industry, and perhaps AI with the right machine learning tools, and if it's trained by the people who are in the know, then it will be helpful to others. Because right now, there's still a lot of people who say, we can sell art, but no, you can't. It's like lawyers. Art law is very different to everyday law. And there are issues that can be discussed by an art lawyer that not necessarily another lawyer will know how and will have to delegate to someone else.
Yeah.
So that's where AI needs to be trained by the experts in each industry, and that's going to happen. And that's where different AIs will, I mean, it's already into place. Chat GPT is the normal open source everybody knows, but there is like hundreds of others that will help you in your specific field. And that's also to come back to Dina Miller's question, is that you need to go out there, and find the right AI. And I mean, there's enough information out there that you can use and then use it well, you can even ask AI to help you find the right one
Yeah.
if you're that keen. We're almost done. We've got 10 minutes left, so I want to ask people if there's any more questions and entice people to come up and talk to us. But the other thing I like to always ask our panelists is what advice would you give? So in your case, Leticia, to your artists, because you deal with them, and to your collectors, what's your advice for the younger generation in your environment, in your community?
Keep looking at what's happening, going to the shows, seeing fairs. Stay aware.
Hmm. Stay aware.
Yeah.
See as much as you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
In our eyes all the time. Yes.
What about John?
So my my advice would essentially be, there are a lot of people now who are, in their 20s or even younger. They are growing up with these technologies and they're just extremely comfortable with it. My advice to them would be not to discount the people that came before them that didn't have access to these, and they have different ways, maybe archaic ways, slower ways of resolving the same problem. Likewise, I would say the opposite. People who are, I'm a Gen X person, and fairly comfortable with technology. Grew up with it, but I didn't. I still have a strong attachment to things that say my parents' generation did. So I do notice that a lot of people are easily quick to discount either technology, and they say I'm old school, or this is not the way it's done, or you're discounting this or whatever, or the new generation, they're lazy, they just want to do it on a computer. These types of I just want everybody to maintain an open mind and have a conversation, because oftentimes the conversations are not nuanced online. But they're more nuanced in person, right? So
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's
you can
my
interact with the other person's reactions, and that's what I found so interesting when we talked to this Adrian Wilson was his name, who was using Paintbox in the mid 80s, and he was actually fascinating and a very good storyteller. But he was saying he was at university in Manchester at the University of the Arts, and he was told you can play with this machine and you're going to get the Hockneys and the Keith Harings and all that alongside, and you just need to operate it and show them how to do it. And for him as an art student, it was like, wow, like very nice sort of a project to have. And then when Photoshop came out, he said, well, we could do all that on Paintbox. It was the same, except that obviously a lot cheaper and everybody could access it. But his reaction was, we had that experience and it's nothing new. And I often find today with when you talk with younger generation, they think, that something's come up because they don't know about it. It's new. And a lot of times, any one of us with a few more years can say, well, it's not that new. It was just different, but it's not that
Yeah.
new. So it's
Yeah.
evolution is actually revolution. It keeps turning and coming back a little bit and then going. And so yeah, the advice is I think it's very good advice to listen to other people's generation. It could also be from different countries, like probably the experiences in Brazil or in Australia are different to the experiences in North America or Europe.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think stay open. Leticia is correct. Be curious and stay open.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I'll just announce the next one. So as I said, we're doing our holidays. We're doing our break for the summer, and we'll be back on the 25th of September. And we're going to be talking about, again, the development and the progress in the gaming industry. I'll remind people that there is a gentleman in Geneva who invented a game back in 2015, I think, and actually worked on Bitcoin and did the very, very ever first NFT. And he's from Geneva, so we'll hopefully have him on the panel. His name is Shaban Chamé, and the game is called Spells of Genesis. So we look forward to that. It'll be on the 25th of September. I'd like to thank Leticia and John for joining us today. It was great, and wish you all a very good summer. Oh,
Thank
and
you.
we have a thank you from Benedict Hadley. Benedict Hadley is a film producer in New York, so he
Great.
was listening to us. So thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate the invitation.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, team.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.